Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about welfare and explain why it is nihilistic and egalitarian. And egalitarian is a very negative term from my perspective, as objectivists know, but if you're not familiar with objectivism, egalitarianism is not a good thing. I'll get into that a lot more in this video for those of you who don't necessarily understand why. So welfare is basically why welfare is such a negative thing is for two major reasons. One is because it takes from the most productive, successful people and gives it to the least productive, least successful people. And a lot of people, when they hear that, they're like, "Oh, well, you're saying all poor people are unproductive and all rich people are super productive?" And no, that's not the case, especially in our mixed economy system where you can get to the top by getting favors from the government. However, in a perfectly free market system, generally this will be the case. Generally, capitalism will reward rationality, will reward hard work, and generally poverty will be as a result of someone who isn't as rational or won't work as hard. It basically punishes immoral people. That's what a capitalist system does. Now that's not to say that there's going to be there will be no instances of people who unjustly have something bad happen to them. But I mean, that's the purpose of things like charity or poverty insurance or the different things that would definitely arise under a capitalist system. And the second big issue is the issue of basically the fact that welfare is completely indiscriminate with who it gives it the money to. It gives it to every single person below a certain level of poverty. It gives it to every single person. And that sort of egalitarianism is extremely immoral. But I'll get into all this in the video. So let's begin with the idea of taking from the most productive and giving to the least productive. As I already explained, capitalism rewards the most rational, the most productive people, because those are the people who can because the rational, productive people can think long-term, think about the things that a society needs or some people would pay for, and basically understand reality and produce something in response to that, and the people who are productive can produce the most, will generally make the most amount of money. And the people who are lazy, don't think about reality, will just be parasites off the backs of other people in society. Those people will generally fall behind. That's generally the case. I can get more into how capitalism would deal with, I'll go a little more into how capitalism would deal with the people who unjustly become poor later in the video when I'm talking about the indiscriminate side, because I think that'll tie in a little bit more. So when you take from these productive people, these are the people who earn their money. These are people who generally were very productive, produced amazing goods, like Jeff Bezos made Amazon. Steve Jobs created Apple and created all the iPhone and iPad and all those beautiful productive things that make our lives so much better. These people were extremely productive and deserve their wealth. And the wife beating drunk as one example that Yaron Brook always uses. I'll probably go back to this example a lot more in this video. That person doesn't produce anything, doesn't really make anything, so he doesn't deserve to make any money. That is generally how a capitalist system would work in a perfectly free market system. Those sort of productive people would generally rise to the top, while the wife beating drunks and the lazy people would generally fall to the bottom of the hierarchy. But when welfare comes in, when the government comes in and institutes a welfare system, it basically takes from these most productive people and gives it to the least productive people, which is extremely nihilistic. It's taking away from the good because they are the good. It's taking away from the productive because they are the productive, which is extremely nihilistic and extremely destructive. Let me just respond to one common claim that a lot of Keynesians make, a lot of leftist economists make, is the basic idea that, when you take from the productive rich people and give it to the poor people, these poor people are going to go to the store and buy a lot more stuff and consume a lot more than this rich person who's just going to hide it under their mattress or whatever the fuck they think that rich people do with their money. And this is absolutely absurd. The idea that having more money in the hands of poor people who are going to consume more is a more productive outcome is absolutely absurd. That is not how economies grow. Consumption is ultimately destruction. Every single act of consumption, as Yaron Brook often says, relies on two acts of production: the act of producing the wealth to buy the good, and the act of the production of the good that is being bought. So if you want to have a efficient economy, if you want to have a good economy, you want to have the people who produce have the most money, because then they can produce more, and they can invest. Because what rich people do is not stuff money under their mattresses. They go and invest it in their businesses, or save it, and then the bankers invest it in other businesses. And basically, this is how economies grow. This is how innovation happens. Because when a banker loans money to a new startup company, this is basically what gives these entrepreneurs the capital to produce new businesses, when these entrepreneurs don't necessarily have the money. If the entrepreneur can convince the bank that what they're doing is rational and going to be productive and going to be profitable, then the bank can loan the money. And this basically eliminates that whole problem that a lot of leftists like to talk about of the bourgeoisie class, who already has all the wealth, is always going to be the ones who create the businesses because they have enough money to create to start up the business. This is the problem that banks eliminate. They give money to these startup businesses, and yeah, essentially. So basically, that solves that problem. And in general, back to my main point, investment is a lot more beneficial to the economy than consumption. That should be obvious to anyone who understands anything about economics. So the whole idea that, back to my larger point, the whole idea that taking money from the productive and giving it to the unproductive, from the rich and giving to the poor. If I use the terms productive and unproductive, it kind of implies my conclusion. So because the most productive people, you'd rather have them have the money than least productive people. But in a capitalist system, in a free society, the most productive people will generally rise to the top, while the least productive people will generally fall to the bottom. That would generally be the case in a capitalist system. So taking from the most productive, from the wealthy, and giving to the poor takes it away from the people who are going to invest and be the most productive in the economy with their money, and gives it to the people who would be least productive in the economy with their money. So the idea that taking from the rich, redistributing to the poor, leads to consumption, which leads to economic growth, is a fallacious idea that it shows such a misunderstanding of basic economics that it's just absolutely absurd to me that someone could think like that. Now, on to the second point about welfare, is the fact that welfare distributes money to the poor indiscriminately. It gives it to every single poor person. This is a form of egalitarianism, the idea that regardless of value, regardless of morality, every single person is the exact same and deserves the same amount, which is not a very good idea, because back to the wife beating drunk example, not every single poor person is a wife beating drunk, but also not every single poor person is a person who was trying to produce and just fell behind in life due to no fault of their own. And in a capitalist system, the majority of the poor people would not be those most productive, be those productive people who simply fell behind. So what a welfare system does is it gives to every single person in this, regardless of their productivity, regardless of the justice of the situation. And that's the problem with egalitarianism, this is a concrete example of the problem with egalitarianism, and basically explains why welfare is such a negative, or why welfare is such a negative thing, because every single poor person gets this money, even the wife beating drunk. That person does not deserve money, does not deserve to survive. That's the person who did not live a life that deserves their survival. Survival is a conditional thing. You have to take certain actions, do certain things to survive. If your actions are leading to death, it is unjust for the government to come in and basically give you things because of that. Because that's what they're doing. They're giving you these things because you are doing things that are leading to your death. So it's so parasitical, so anti-life, and so extremely nihilistic, giving money to these type of people who by all means should probably deserve to die at that point, because of the things that they have done. The actions they have taken are not conducive to life and are basically extremely immoral. So that is basically the biggest problem with welfare. It gives to these people indiscriminately. Now, the good thing about charity, which is basically the means that would fill this same sort of end in a capitalist system, is the fact that it does discriminate between these two types of people. It notices that there are certain people who fell behind by no fault of their own for unjust reasons, and it gives money to these people because it's in our self-interest to it's in our general self-interest, I think, for most people, to give money to these people who were unjustly who became poor unjustly, even though they were productive, because we want to see these type of people, these productive people, rise up in society because of the values that they can produce for me, because of the values they can produce for you, and because of the fact that I want to live in a system that is just, where people don't fall behind unjustly. So that's one very beneficial thing about charity. It gives to these sort of people. It can discriminate against the wife-beating drunks and gives to the sort of people that fall behind by no fault of their own, and then it helps these people rise back up. And also, with charity, these people want to get off of charity. These people want to produce and be productive, get off this charity, and rise up in society. So yeah, basically, it would give these people just that little safety net to allow them to bounce back, and get back into society, get back into a higher level on the hierarchy, I guess. I know a lot of people hate the term hierarchy, so that's why I'm throwing it in this video as much as I have. But yeah, back to the main point. Charity basically discriminates against these wife-beating drunks, gives to these more productive people, and for that reason, it's a lot more efficient than welfare. It rewards the people who are doing things that are conducive to life and punishes the people who are doing things that are negative to life. And in that way, charity is a just system, while welfare is an egalitarian system that is nihilistic and unjust, because it takes away from the good to give away to the bad, and does so indiscriminately, so that even the bad people are rewarded, which is unjust, basically. So yeah, also, one other idea that I've thought about quite a bit with regards to replacing welfare and basically solving the issue of poverty is this idea of poverty insurance, where there's generally a risk in life, no matter how small, that something really bad happens to you and you become poor by no fault of your own, regardless of how productive you are. There's basically that risk with everything. And the goal of insurance primarily is to eliminate this risk, is to make life more predictable. I'm going into the insurance field, so this is something I've thought about quite a bit. So the goal of insurance is to eliminate this risk, make life predictable in the context of risk. And everybody generally has some sort of risk of falling into poverty. So I think a rational person would be willing to buy some sort of poverty insurance and pay money into that, basically. And if they ever fall behind, then they get payouts so that they can survive in this time of poverty. And if they can survive that time, and they can bounce back out and they can keep paying back in, it basically gives them a sort of safety net, I guess. I know this word probably triggers some people, but it basically gives them a private safety net that works fairly well, because the people who understand risk, the people who think long term, will be more willing to pay into this. And if they ever fall behind, then they would be rewarded for that long term thinking. But the people who are like, I'll never become poor, this will never happen to me, or they are living an irrational life and don't want to pay into this sort of thing, they would be thinking short term, and they would pay the consequences for their actions. They would not receive this type of poverty insurance later if they fall into poverty. So yeah, with that, I think that's all that I wanted to talk about in this video. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Peace.